So then, and then a few years later, we must have, every time we went to Prague, we'd hang out with Stuart and talk about what we're up to. And I remember, he asked us what we're been up to lately. And this is probably 2005 or, somewhere in there. And, we told you about the project, and that was kind of the first you heard, at least of us, doing a screenplay on it. But it was probably around what, 2010 or 11 when you tell us about how you first had the idea to turn this into a graphic novel.
Well, yeah, I remember the first time we talked about it was in Letna, and it would have been early 2000s, so maybe 3, 4, 5, something like that. Whenever you were here, and you told me about it, and I remember saying, "Yeah, wait a minute, I know what that is," because you said, well, "What's do you know what MKUltra is?" And I said, "Yeah," and you seemed, I think it was Brandon, seemed surprised I knew what it was, but I mean, I've always been into all these weird things, like reading about them. But I can't say I knew that much about it, but I knew vaguely there was this thing. But of course, like you, I went and looked into it and realized it was much more insane than I could have actually believed. But it was years later, it was like 2012 or 2013 that we finally did set about doing it. Because I'd said to you in Letton, "Oh, that would make a great graphic novel, but there was no way to do it. There was no time for it. And I was busy with all sorts of stuff. And it just didn't seem to be a way to do it. And then come 12 or 13, remember we talked more about it, and I started to flesh it out. And then I remember we set a course, we're going to do it. And I figured it would take 3 to 5 years maximum. But I didn't account for rejection letters and so forth. But the breakdown, I did a breakdown. It took a month and a half just to do the breakdown. Yeah. And I drew every panel and I put all the text in, so I knew I had everything. And it was really satisfying, because once I had it, I had the book. I could read it, and I was really, really happy with that. And then I had to go up a level and redraw all the panels.
Well, so just really quick, back to that first thing. So what was your process for, we had a screenplay, and we had been trying to make, get it made as a movie. We'd actually gone around and had visits, meetings with Hollywood producers and executives, our agents sent us around. Everyone loved the script and this idea. Nobody wanted to make it. And we were convinced because they're afraid they might get whacked or something,
Yeah, that was so weird. We literally had like 15 meetings all over town. Like, "Oh, we love this, but what else you got?"
Yeah.
Well, what about this?
So when we decided, when you pitched this as, "Hey, well, why don't we do it as a graphic novel?" And then, that's another possible way in, because it'll be a property, and how Hollywood loves to jump on like pre-existing properties, So that was kind of that was the excitement, or the reason we were excited about it. You obviously had your own, what was your, what motivated you to want to do this?
It was talking about, I think it was initially talking about the sort of sequence where Hoffman trips, and how you described. I remember we were laughing about the description of the kind of opening credits as you imagined it for a film, and there was all this stuff happening, and I think he was going down a sort of treacle river on a boat, and there was all this Lucy in the sky with diamonds type stuff happening. And that's the credits. And all these mushrooms are springing up and stuff. And it was that thinking, and I seem to think I said to you, unlimited special effects for the comic book. You'd be limited. We've even had discussions recently with one of the directors, and he suggested for the first I'd heard, there would be all sorts of some limitations on what you could do. And of course, that's true with film. You have to have a budget for all these different things. But with the comic book, you're unlimited in your limitations of the imagination and scale and time that an artist is willing to put into it.
Right.
So that was probably the initial thing. And then seeing all the color, and then imagine it going from black and white to color, which isn't a unique thing. I've seen that in other things, but it was also for me going from like EC horror type scientist in a laboratory to 60s American comics that are all kind of color and misregistered and so forth. And and then I delved into the literature that was around at the time, things like Oz magazine, and looked at the artwork. And we think of all the stuff like the artwork for Yellow Submarine, but Yellow Submarine was really reacting to things that were going on in Oz magazine and other publications like that. And people like Robert Crumb, Robert Crumb did it's all tied into comics in some ways, because Robert Crumb did a pornographic what was it? One of the famous children's Bear, I forget the name of it, but Oz magazine was dragged into court because of Robert Crumb in London. So I got all these Oz magazines, started looking at them all. And then there was all the text that was there that backed up what you just said with regard to crazy sort of tripped out people who start believing all sorts of paranoid stuff. This was the literature you were reading in these old Oz magazines. But from my perspective, 35, 40 years hence, I'm looking back going, they're right. That happened.
Yeah.
They're not entirely right, but much of that's right. So there's things like, I met with a CIA agent, and I've got that and put that in the book and various places. So yes, bringing all this kind of stuff together. And then of course the big idea, which is that the CIA are trying to control people's minds. Yeah. And in the process create chaos, like imagination, chaos, like music, art, all this stuff sprang from that era. Because Ken Kesey comes out of the army, he's been working at a sanitarium, and he joins this program where they're testing LSD, but it's a CIA program.
Yeah.
And when he gets off the program, he loves this LSD so much, he teams up with a chemist, and they start mass producing this stuff. And then the Beatles come through San Francisco, and they acid test with them. Mm-hmm. And then you get the whole Magical Mystery Tour all springs from that. Yeah. This all exploded out of a CIA project.
Yeah, yeah.
Crazy when you think about it, but it's right there. It's a fact.
Yeah.
And that was one of the really cool things that I thought story-wise was this sort of theory that we're exploring, that in some ways the CIA and this whole program sort of manufactured the psychedelic sissies in a way.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
they did.
Which is crazy to think about. Like, they're the ones who, then they try to ruin it by flooding the market with bad acid.
There you go.
They create a monster.
It's like go ahead. When they use a weapon, and the weapon falls into the hands of the enemy.
Right.
That's what happened.
That's just really interesting shit.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. And that I think that was like the third leg for me that I knew we had, something here was, the first being the Operation Midnight Climax, second being Eric Olson, an actual victim of the program. Third, this idea that they were trying to develop this, mind control drug to win the Cold War, to beat the Russians, to the perfect truth serum kind of thing. And then that eventually, gets into the university system, and Kesey and Leary and these guys get their, get their first LSD, and then start turning on the whole world, and then becoming like anti-war, peace and love, and like it turns them into this like, let's love everyone and no more. So it's like it just, and then now the CIA is like, oh crap, our like, what did Gottlieb call it? Our or no, it was Hoffman who said my pet project or something like, has now become, whatever, I can't remember what it was, but that's that they, now they have to do damage control. Like, oh crap, like we've fucked up,
we're trying to make war and we're making peace.
Yeah. So, that was, and I think that's what probably attracted all of us, was it's, just had everything, all the makings for a really cool story, which is why we thought it could be a movie, TV show, obviously a book.